My health problems has been
osteoarthritis, leukemia,
fibromyalgia, 3 different cancers.
I could only walk a few yards for weeks.
I just sort of wasn't really doing anything.
They're just simply getting worse and worse.
That's why I started coming to the gym.
Physical activities help me enormously.
I find walking easier now.
It's great fun and we get to know each other, we make friends.
I'm going to have a go at doing something.
Any exercise I've learned makes you feel better afterwards.
I can keep myself fit, I can keep myself relatively healthy and keep myself focused on something positive.
Me enjoying exercise is unheard of, but I do.
I owe it to them to make sure I don't just survive, I live.
Guys, and welcome. That was just our We Are Undefeatable film for some of our ambassadors who have been promoting through the pandemic, keeping active. Then they are people with long-term health conditions. So my name's Jane Knowles. I'm Chief Exec of Somerset Activity and Sports Partnership. And as many of you will know, our mission is to create a healthier and happier Somerset using physical activity as our tool. We're particularly focused on those individuals and communities who are traditionally least active. So those of you who don't know our work will know that we absolutely don't wander around the county, whips in hand, making people feel guilty about not moving enough. What we try to do is work with people to understand their concerns and motivations and create things that make it possible for them to be more active, working from where they are to where they might want to be. And I know many of you will be there too. So over the last year, which has been a tricky year for the vast majority, we have focused many more resources at supporting people of more mature years to find the love and feel the benefits of being active. And you could see that in the film. And we'll hear from Chrissy later on about this. And we've used the We Are Undefeatable campaign, which is part funded through Sport England, to help with this. But over the pandemic, we've really had to change our plans, hasn't everyone, hey? So around how we best support, and we've done some work with the Shielded group. We did a huge 30,000 people postal survey to look at insights, attitudes and confidence for people who were shielding at the time. We had about 3,000 individual responses, and much of our work during this year our offline work, if you like, we've done lots virtually, but our offline work has been focused around some of those responses with our Love to Pedal scheme, which has gone out into care homes and is now, you'll hear from Leanne will say hello later, who has now moved that into individual ability to use that, and also with some of our short walks, and that really plays to some of the social prescribing piece that we'll see later on today. And we're really keen to align our work and embed those positive messages with you and with everybody, so that people can do that with their friends, their family, as well as the people that you support perhaps professionally as well. And we finish with a little piece around digital, which has become so important during this past year. So my mum at 89, who lives in North Wales, so nowhere near me, now gives me a lowdown on her physical activity before we start our conversation, but on a video call. And the video call has changed her life. And I don't say that, I say that in real terms. It has made a super difference. She has talked to her grandchildren more. She has looked around their houses as they've shown her where they live, because nobody lives very close to her. And that came from conversation that I had with Kate, who will present later on, around digitally enabled tablets. So I'm just going to hand over to Phil. So we're really delighted to work with Age UK on this Living Longer Better agenda. So Age UK Somerset have always been key players in the physical activity world for older people in Somerset. So and to work with them and their expertise is fantastic. So I'm going to pass on to Phil just to say a quick welcome before we get started.
Thanks, Jane. So yes, as Jane rightly said, we're delighted at Age UK Somerset to be working with SASP on this, shoulder to shoulder, as it were, on a number of projects, of which this is clearly one of the most important. Can we also thank everybody for making time in their busy schedules to attend the conference today? We're really grateful that you're showing your support this way. And I think it's fair to say, as Jane touched on, that for many of our organisations, we have spent many years doing the best that we can to ensure that our older people enjoy the very best later years that's possible for them. And so it would take too long for us to go through all the things that our organisation, your organisations have been doing. But maybe it is time for us to have a step change. Maybe it is time for us to have a refocusing on what is important and what really does work. And many of us would acknowledge that with light at the end of a very, very long COVID tunnel, there's probably never been a better time for us just to pause for a moment, look at the landscape and see what we possibly could do together as we move forward. So can I also say finally that I'm very grateful to SASP, Jane and her team for all the hard work that they've done in putting this on. And I look forward, as you do, to a great discussion today. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Phil. That's fantastic. So without further ado, we're going to move on to our first speaker, which is Jess Kuhn, who's the Senior Programme Manager at Healthy Ageing Centre for Ageing Better, who I saw at a conference I went to, and with a fantastic presentation around the state of the ageing, state of the sector report, sorry. So if you have questions, please do put them in the chat as you go. So if I could hand over to Jess, that would be fantastic. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Jane.
Hello.
I'm just going to share my screen. One moment.
That's perfect.
And that should be it. So hopefully everyone can see that now. So, yeah, thanks, Jane, for the introduction. So as Jane said, I'm Jess Kuhn. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Healthy Aging at the Center for Aging Better, which includes, so as part of our overall work on healthy aging, we also have a program of work on physical activity. So I've been asked today to give a summary of our State of Aging report, which is our flagship annual report that looks at the state of aging, the latest data available on aging. So it looks at health, housing, communities, and work. And I'm going to be talking about the health aspect of that report today. So just a very brief overview for those of us, for you who may not know who we are. So the Center for Aging Better is an independent charitable foundation. So we started about 6 years ago now by the former chair of our board, Lord Filkin, who sits in the House of Lords. He did an inquiry into whether or not the UK is ready for aging and found that the answer is no. We as a society, as a country, are not ready for our aging population. And so he went on from that to start an organization and secured funding from the National Lottery Community Fund. So we are entirely funded by an endowment from the National Lottery. We are a part of the network of What Works organizations. So this is a network of organizations. I think there's about 11 of us now. So there's one on policing, there's one on early intervention, there's one on well-being, local economic growth, and we all work in slightly different ways, but we all share kind of a mission to promote the better use of evidence in policy and practice. And also NICE, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the National Institute for Clinical and Care Excellence, is also a What Works Center, and probably the oldest and most well-known of all the What Works Centers. And our vision as an organization is a society where everyone enjoys their later life. Also important to mention is that we as an organization are mainly focused on people in mid to later life, so approximately those aged 50 to 70, because we think there is still ample opportunity to kind of change people's trajectories before they reach that later life stage. So there's many other organizations, for example, Age UK, Independent Age, that are focusing more on that later life stage, and we're focusing on more of that approaching later life stage. And this is a Venn diagram to just give a brief overview of the issue areas that we focus on. So we have 4 priority areas: communities, housing, work, and health. And I'm going to be talking about the health aspect today. So our State of Aging report for 2020 came out at the end of last year. It covers all 4 of those areas. So if you are interested in finding out more about communities, work, and housing, I would encourage you to go on our website and take a look. It's a very interactive way that we've laid it out, and I'm just going to cover basically what the report summarizes on health. So the headline messages, basically, we're all living much longer than we were in the past. We're living longer than previous generations, but for those additional years that we've gained, we are spending a longer period of time, a longer proportion of our lives in poor health, and actually progress on life expectancy is stalling. So these are quite worrying trends. So if you look at disability-free life expectancy in England at birth, you can see that we are spending that light purple area, that represents the amount of time that we spend in poor health. And when I talk about disability-free life expectancy, I'm talking about health conditions that are disabling. So disability-free life expectancy is a measure of not only your health status, so not only your physical and mental health, but it's also whether or not your health condition limits you or disables you in any way. So, for example, someone might have a mobility issue, but if they live in a supportive environment where they're still able to get out and access things, they may not consider that mobility issue to be limiting or disabling to them. And so that wouldn't necessarily be reflected in this. So this is really disability-free life expectancy is a measure of disabling health conditions. And yeah, what we're finding is that people are spending more time with disabling health conditions. So for women at birth, the expectation is basically that you would spend the last quarter of your life with a disabling health condition, and for men it's the last fifth. And when looking at what this means for people at 65, it's about half. So for women and for men, once they reach 65, about half of their remaining time that they have in terms of life expectancy, they can expect to be living with a disabling health condition. So they're spending that time in poor health. This graph is basically a summary to show the trends of both life expectancy and disability life expectancy. So the blue lines are life expectancy for men and women at birth and for men and women at the age of 65. And the green ones are for disability life expectancy. So you can see that the overall trend in life expectancy has been that it's still going up, although progress is stalling. And for disability-free life expectancy, it's not going up. So in the proportion we're spending of our extra years is generally not in good health. And for women in particular, you can see this real downward trend, and that's especially true for women from the poorest areas across the country. This graph is basically a version of the previous one, but this one is showing the percentage of our lives spent with a disability at birth and at age 65. So again, you can see this upward trending line is showing that we are spending a greater proportion of our lives in poor health. And that's overall quite worrying in terms of because we obviously want our later lives is, it is quite an achievement, but we do want to be supporting more people to spend those additional years that we've gained in good health. There's also huge disparities in terms of the impact across between the richest and the poorest. So people from the richest areas are really spending a much longer period of time in good health compared to those living in the poorest. And that's true for both men and women. So there is quite a stark contrast. And also people from the poorest areas are developing their first health condition, their first long-term health condition at a much earlier age than people from the richest areas. There is also a significant north-south divide. So people living in the south of England have much longer disability-free life expectancy than those living in the north. And then this next graph takes a look at which conditions actually contribute to that disability in later life. So I think if you're asked, what health conditions do you associate with growing older, with later life, I think a lot of people would probably think things like cancer and heart disease, but those conditions are more related to mortality in terms of conditions that are actually disabling and causing you to limit your activities on a day-to-day basis. Actually, musculoskeletal disorders, so back and neck pain in particular, are some of the biggest contributors to disability in later life. And as you go down the line of this graph, you can see that there's a big jump in particular for sense organ diseases. So the purpley dark blue bars are for people aged 50 to 69, and the green bars are for people aged 70 and over. So for sense organ diseases, which is vision and hearing impairment and loss, there is that really big jump after the age of 70. So vision and hearing loss are not conditions that are causing mortality, they aren't causing death, but they are really big contributors to being disabling and causing disability in later life. And this next graph, again, just shows the discrepancy between the prevalence of health conditions when comparing the richest and the poorest. So this graph is for women. So you can see that the poorest women are much more likely to suffer from depression than the richest women, and that trend is true for pretty much across, that pattern can be seen pretty much across health conditions. And a similar trend, so this next graph is for men. A similar trend plays out across patterns, across common disorders for men as well. So if you are from more deprived areas, from more disadvantaged areas, you're much more likely to be suffering from these disabling health conditions than if you're from a wealthier area. The next couple of slides I'm going to talk about are specifically about health behaviors. So thinking about thinking about risk factors for poor health in later life. So these next few slides are on physical activity in particular. So one of the things we know is the older we get, the more inactive we get. The dark purple part of the bar shows people who are inactive. And when I say inactive, I mean people, so the way this is Sport England Active Lives data. So I'm sure many of you will be familiar with this, but anyone doing 30 minutes of activity, less than 30 minutes of activity per week is considered to be inactive. And there is a real increase in the number of people who are inactive around the age of 50, and then a significant jump around the 75 age mark. So overall, physical activity physical inactivity is a risk factor for poor health in later life. And it also, we know that physical activity helps to manage many health conditions, but at the same time, many people as they grow older are also getting more inactive. And as per many of the previous slides, you can see that this does not play out evenly across the country. People in the least deprived areas are much more likely to be active compared to those in the most deprived areas. So much higher rates of inactivity among the most deprived areas. And similarly, there's also big variations amongst ethnic groups. I should also mention there's also significant variations between, so obviously people, and not surprisingly, people with health conditions or with disabilities tend to be more likely to be inactive than people without, and women are very slightly more likely to be inactive than men. And this is a map to show how this plays out across the country. So people in Cumbria and North Yorkshire are more likely to be inactive in midlife than compared to other parts of the country. Moving on to the next risk factor, which is living with obesity. So a lot in the media is often talked about concerns about childhood obesity, and that is, of course, a real significant and worrying concern. But if you look at the statistics, the highest levels of people living with obesity are actually in that midlife cohort. So obesity levels really peak in that 50 to 75 age group, and we already know that has had a significant impact on placing individuals at risk of COVID, and it also places them at risk of many other health conditions. So one of the things we're really calling for is more of a focus on obesity across the life course, and particularly in that mid to later life age cohort. When looking at smoking, overall smoking tends to decline with age because many people are quitting, or there's obviously many people who are actually dying off because of smoking related health conditions. But 1/5 of men aged 50 to 59 are still smoking. So smoking still is a concern even in that mid to later life cohort. And then the final risk factor that I'm going to talk about is alcohol. So similar to obesity, I think alcohol, when it's talked about in the media, there's always a lot of focus, a lot of attention to binge drinking amongst younger age groups. But actually, if you look at this graph, the percentage of the highest levels of harmful alcohol consumption are actually, again, in that midlife category. And that is, again, something that's really concerning, and something that we think really needs more attention to be paid to it, because it's, again, something that needs a focus across the life course and not just on those younger age groups. So that was a whirlwind summary of the stats on health from our report. As I mentioned, there's a whole host of stats similar to the ones I showed you for housing, for work, and for communities. So if you would like to have a browse, it's a very interactive website. It basically shows graphs as similar to the ones I've just gone through. This is the link. And yeah, if you're interested, I'd really encourage you to just have a click around. And that's it from me. So I think if there's time for questions, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Jess. That was a whistle-stop tour around some of those areas, and is really, I think, very stark in terms of actually where our physical activity and physical activity and ageing is, and why it's really important that we start to address some of this agenda. I'm particularly interested in the 50 to 70 year age range, and whether that is a focus for us. Really happy to take some questions. You can either put them in the chat, or if you would like to unmute yourself, then that's probably fine. Leanne, did we have anything in the chat?
Hi everyone. First of all, I'm Leanne Clark. I'm the Active Ageing Manager for SASP. Lovely to see so many of you on the call this morning. Welcome. We don't have anything particular at the moment. We've got lots of lovely introductions, lots of nice organisations joining us. Got some feedback from Phil saying great presentation, lots of good stats. Thank you. Anyone else would like to share anything? Any questions or comments for Jess?
So I have a question around the 50 to 70 age range. So Jess, in terms of your organisation, do you think, where do you think that the focus should be for community physical activity around those different age ranges from 50 up?
That's a really good question, because it's one that we as an organisation have looked at ourselves. So our focus priority areas that we've decided on is the fitness and leisure sector. So we think there is quite a significant opportunity for the fitness and leisure sector to develop more age-friendly and age-inclusive offers. We know that people aged 50 and over aren't really engaging with the fitness and leisure sector to the same extent that people from younger age groups are. So we think there are opportunities to change that. So just thinking, I mean, just a very brief example is thinking about tailoring sessions by ability rather than by age. So rather than saying, this is a session targeted at people aged 50 and over, instead of saying things like that, which doesn't appeal to everyone, making it more about abilities. So saying something like, if you can walk a mile, this class or this session might be for you. So yeah, and there's a range of different things that providers can think about in terms of trying to make their sessions more age friendly. And it is something that we're also looking into, working with the fitness and active leisure sector to trial out new approaches and see what works. And so that's more on the leisure side. Then on the in terms of increasing physical activity outside of leisure, we're particularly interested in active travel. So promoting walking and cycling for those everyday journeys. Again, there's quite a stark age contrast. We know that people in mid to later life are much less likely to be walking and cycling for those everyday journeys to get places. And we would like to, also trial and test some new approaches to see what works to increase walking and cycling, particularly for groups of individuals that we know are missing out and are already less likely to take up active travel.
It's really useful. Thanks, Jess. And I think food for thought for all of us, because obviously the 50 to much older is a huge age range with huge life-changing differences between people in that. So actually trying to work out where we are most efficient and effective at working is probably key too. So were there any other questions, Leanne? Are we done?
There was a question from Jackie, and that was relating to exercise. Is exercise also related to the environment? I think you might have summed that up a little bit with your previous comment, but is there anything more you wanted to add around sort of exercise and the environment?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we know that the environment can play a really enabling or disabling factor in terms of whether or not people are taking up physical activity. And again, in terms of active travel, that's something that we're particularly interested in. So we know that the built environment plays a role. There's a number of factors that affect everyone in terms of whether or not they're likely to take up walking and cycling, but for that mid to later life cohort, road safety is a particular concern. So more whether or not real or perceived road safety is a bigger concern for that age group compared to other age groups, as an example. And that's something that we're actually doing a lot of work on right now. So we have a research project that is currently summarizing the evidence about what we know in terms of attitudes towards active travel amongst that mid to later life cohort. And we've also done an evidence review on the built environment. We're hoping that we can publish interim findings on that research in the next month or two. And following on from that research, we are going to be doing some primary research as well to better dig into some of those barriers, especially amongst groups that aren't represented in the research. So getting a bit more into those research gaps. So that's something that we would be really keen to share with the rest of the group, as well as some research that we're doing on inactivity amongst this age group as well. So those are two research projects, inactivity and active travel, that we're hoping to complete by the summer, and would be really keen to share more widely.
That's great. And I think that did Alan Pryor have his hand up? Alan?
Yeah, I've put my question in chat actually, because I realise it's difficult with so many people to see somebody with the hand up. It's really just a question about nudge theory, which I came across some years ago when I saw a very simple example at one of the London Underground stations, where they did some research and they discovered that virtually there were an escalator going up, escalator coming down, and stairs in the middle. And they discovered that the vast majority of people were taking the escalators. So what they did was they just painted some footsteps on the floor leading to the steps. And it increased the number of people actually walking up and down the steps rather than taking the escalator by about 30%, I think it was. You're seeing a similar thing with organ donations in this country, where it used to be that you had to make the effort to get enrolled to be a donor. Now it's you are now automatically enrolled unless you make the effort to be unenrolled. So I just wondered if you're looking at using that nudge theory to encourage people to exercise more.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question.
But you can't force people to exercise.
Yeah, so the behavior change is obviously a really key element of what we're interested in. We haven't done that much on nudge theory insofar as I think we're more interested in taking whole systems approaches, so looking at the wider complex system and what needs to be changed at more of a local authority level, local transport level. But that kind of behavior change element is definitely a key part of it.
So we've got some other questions in the chat, which I'm going to put to Jess later, because otherwise we will run out of time. So, and Jess, I hope that you will answer them and then we will send them out to everybody if we've got a chance, because I know Muir has to go at 11:30. So I just want to say thank you so much, Jess. I think that we're really interested in that State of Ageing report. It gives us some key platforms to work from and some key information. And I know as SASP that we want to continue to work for the Centre for Ageing Better as closely as we can. So thank you so much for your time and presenting your research so succinctly and well. So it's completely understandable. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So we'd like to just move on to Muir, who, as many people will know, is a rather inspirational character, and a character he is around ageing well at the moment. So he worked with Optimal Age and has been working with active partnerships, of which SASP is one, and with Age UK, to look at actually how we change the conversations around ageing. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Muir. Are you ready, Muir? You're happy to share?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Hi.
Well, very nice to meet you all. And I think SASP is terrific. I've been very impressed with what Jane and the team have done. So it's very nice to meet you and tell a little bit about the movement we're all part of, the revolution. This is a revolution we need, a cultural revolution. But most revolutions are cultural revolutions. They sometimes have guns involved as well, but this is a cultural revolution to change the way we think about living longer. And I've been working on this 50 years now, since I first came to Oxford, to understand what happens to us. And what I thought I'd do is maybe spend about 10 minutes giving you the sort of talk I would give in Somerset at a bowls club or a bridge club or the Women's Institute or a church hall, just so you can see what the message is for the public. Because actually what we find is that the professionals are just as confused as the public about what's happening. And the more highly trained they are, the less likely are they to realize it. So we use what we're saying to the public as a means of bringing about change in the professions. For example, I find there's a lot of confusion. Confusion is a very big problem. And it's doctors who are confused about what is dementia and how does it differ from Alzheimer's disease. That's a sort of example of what we're going to do. We're going to change the way people think. So let me try, with the wonders of Zoom, to share the screen. And ladies and gentlemen of the Bowls Club or the Bridge Club, I don't know if anyone here plays bridge. Perhaps you know the special problem about bridge? There's north, south, and east, west. And north, south, and east, west, north and south never move the whole evening. At least east, west move from table to table. So I've got a campaign with the North Oxford Bridge Club to try to change that. Okay, so let me start. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for asking me to come and share with you what we've learned over the years. And I'm going to tell you about the science that we know about what happens as we live longer, and about the evidence, the scientific evidence about how we can influence that. And I think the first point to make is that there aren't three phases in life of childhood, work, and retirement. There are two phases. There's a phase of growth and development. There's a turning point. And from then on, it's downhill all the way. But that's not the bad news it seems, as I'll explain to you. And most people assume that it's going downhill because of aging, a normal biological process. But aging by itself is not a cause of major problems until the 90s. It does affect two things, so you have to take aging seriously. It affects the maximum level of ability, the maximum pulse rate, for example, and it affects resilience, the ability to cope with a trip or a stumble or with lockdown. And we wrote a paper in the Lancet calling this is the year of reconditioning. So I was doing all this before COVID came along, ladies and gentlemen. But actually what's happened to us in the last year has been very significant. Now you can see here what we mean by resilience. When something happens to you, and it could be a week in bed for a very good reason, having had an operation, it could be a trip or stumble, it could be a year, particularly those who've had to be a year on their own. Recovery is slower, it takes longer, and it may not be complete. That's what we mean by loss of resilience. But what happens to us as we live longer is due to three other processes. And the first of these is loss of fitness. So from the turning point, the fitness gap opens up for almost everybody for the best possible rate of decline. Now, I saw in the Telegraph today, Roger Federer is back at his best. But I think 40 is about the age when aging really kicks in. And even though Federer and Serena Williams, even though they carry on training as they do, they are starting to have an impact. So the fitness gap opens up, not due to aging, but due to the world we live in. It's an environmental problem. The world of the car, the computer, and the desk job. And most people start about 22 when they get their first desk job, and often their first car. And from then on, it's downhill all the way. I saw a chap digging the road outside my office, and he was moving two thumbs. Now, maybe he'll get repetitive strain injury in his forearm muscles, but he wasn't digging in the way people used to dig. And I'm not saying we should go back to digging the roads for the good of our health, but we have to recognize it's an environmental change that's taking place. We have Paleolithic bodies developed genetically to be good at running about and searching for food to sitting. We have Paleolithic bodies in a post-Paleolithic world. And the second point to emphasize is the similarity between loss of fitness and aging. So fitness affects your maximum level of ability and also your resilience, how quickly you recover. So if I asked all of you to go and run for 20 minutes, I'd have a much better idea of how fit you were. Some would not return, and I could classify them in a certain way. And of those who returned, the rate at which they recovered and the degree of distress would vary. Now, you see, maximum ability and loss of resilience, that's the same as aging. And that's the reason the medical profession has until very, very recently failed to recognize that much of what happens to us after 20 is loss of fitness, with fitness being associated with young people and leotards and sports people. But again, the work SASP is doing is changing the culture, because the longer you live, the more important does fitness become. And there's no upper age limit that means we cannot narrow the fitness gap. And because of the loss of resilience, it means that every year you have to do more activity, not less, because of the effects of aging. Then we see the other factor that comes along is disease, the second process. Now, most diseases are not due to aging. You do need a bit of luck to avoid the diseases we cannot prevent, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, but most diseases are environmental. They're the world we live in. I don't like the word lifestyle. I mean, if you're commuting from Vauxhall to Barking, sitting for an hour, then sitting at a computer for 9 hours, and then sitting an hour back home, that's an environmental problem. It's very hard to find time for brisk walking, although it can be done, of course. So these are environmental problems. And what we see here is the fitness gap gets wider, faster after the onset of disease. So I had a heart attack and a stent about 6 years ago. So my best possible level of ability has declined. I've lost a chunk of cardiac muscle. But for most people, the problem is that the fitness gap gets wider, faster. Not because of the disease, but because of the third factor that affects us after fitness, disease, and negative thinking on other people. And as you can see here, this person has dropped below what I call the line. And this is, for example, the level required to get to the toilet in time. And when you get below that line, that's it, game over. Now, the good news is that at any age, no matter how many conditions you've got, you can close the fitness gap. And this has huge implications for the health service and for social care, as I'll come on to. So the more conditions you've got, the more activity you need. So that's the problem of the third factor. It's wrong beliefs and pessimistic attitudes. And the work of the Centre for Aging Better and Age UK is very important in countering ageism. Ageism isn't just excluding people because of their age, it's this negative thinking. Now, what we're starting to do now is to think in a different way about the positive, about reconditioning as opposed to deconditioning. So here's the message to you. And in the Bowls Club, I know you're doing exercise in the bowling green, but we would like you to be more active, and particularly in stamina, skill, suppleness, and strength. But what we are saying to you now is that every year you have to do even more. And every diagnosis, you've got to do even more. We will also can tell you you can reduce your risk of dementia, perhaps by at least 30%. And we can tell you that doing even more for other people and strengthening your sense of purpose is very good for well-being. So, being a volunteer, being on the committee of the Bridge Club or the Bowls Club, particularly if it's a difficult committee, is very good for you. So, what are we trying to do? Now, if I leave the Bowls Club and just say a little bit to Somerset, this is what we're aiming to do nationally. Our aim is to compress that period at the end of life when you get multiple health problems, or to put it positively, to increase health span, not lifespan, but health span. Because I don't meet many people who want to live to 118 or 142, which some people are promising from the laboratories, but it's health span that's important to people. So how do we do this? Well, I'm now in the middle of my 28th reorganization of the NHS, most of which have made no difference at all. It's not a structural change that we need, because what we're dealing with is too complex for structure. We need a system. A system is a set of activities with a common set of objectives. And here are the objectives we're working to. Not arranged in order of importance, but you can see here some are fairly obvious, like to increase physical ability and fitness and increase health span, which is part of the mission of SASP. But actually, if you look at the work SASP is doing, it's an influence on almost all these other objectives. Very interesting one there, I'll just point out to you a couple of them, to enable strengthening of purpose. Ikigai, the Japanese call it. So I'm very interested in the sense of purpose. So not only do we want older people like me, age 76, being more active, it'd be very good if they could be active in groups, even though they're housebound, perhaps using virtual reality and the internet. It'd be very good if those groups had a social purpose, raising money for the Somerset Wildlife Trust, for example. And I also like the idea of the groups competing with one another. And you can think of the towns of Somerset where people were very strongly motivated by competing against other towns in Somerset or in Wiltshire or in Bristol. So strength of purpose. The last one there is also, we're probably changing the wording of that to talk about enabling dying well as living well. And again, I'd hope that every Bowls Club and Bridge Club would have a discussion once a year about the future and what happens at the end of life. What is an advance directive? Have you discussed this with friends and family? Are you clear what the risks are of a bad death and how you could die well or increase the probability of dying well? We've got projects going in Essex and in Scotland looking at this particular objective. Just to finish, where the so systems are delivered by networks, and one of the things I like about Jane's style, she's a very good networker. You certainly need bureaucracies, but bureaucracies are good for linear tasks like the fair and open employment of staff. Population aging is a complex challenge and needs a network. And I know within Somerset, you've got different populations and different networks within the network. And the last thing we need is the cultural revolution, a new positive culture. So here there are a number of things that we've got and we're working with SASP to develop. One is the new language. For example, I don't like the word retirement. It should be called renaissance. I don't actually like the word care. It implies doing things for people. So we are talking more about enabling or even coaching. Coaches help people close the gap between potential and performance. And then we're a learning program for older people and those who support them. And one of the plans we've got, and I think Jane and I will be bidding to the NHS for this, there must be in Somerset about 1,000 people we need to rewire their brains. Not older people, but wardens of sheltered housing, pharmacy assistants, practice nurses, GPs. And there'll be a lot of volunteers for Age UK who need to think in a different way. And we're increasingly delivering information to older people through the GP record system. It does mean getting people online. And one of my colleagues, Neil Bacon, is taking a special interest in this, and that your library service is probably already doing this. Librarians are very important. And again, this idea of maintaining strength of purpose. So Jane, that's a brief discussion or a brief presentation, both to a group of people in Somerset, the sort of pitch. And I would hope that any of you could give that message. It's pretty simple, actually. So when we train 1,000 people, I would think that every pharmacy assistant, every practice nurse, every warden of shelter housing, every person involved in social care or home support would understand these issues and be able to communicate them to others. That's the cultural revolution. So Jane, very happy. I'm not in a rush to go to 11:30. Happy to take questions or people put things in the chat box that we could pick up.
Oh, I forgot to unmute myself even on a conference. That's not good, is it? So thank you, Muir. That's, as ever, a very energising piece. So Muir and I have done some work together, and I am always feel very energised after spending time with Muir. So this year of reconditioning, I love the narrowing of the fitness gap, but one of the things that I really, really love is the change of language and change of culture around not doing things for people, but enabling them, about changing the culture from care to coaching and care to enablement. I love that sense of empowerment. And I know that that is the way that the vast majority of Somerset want to go. And we'll hear from Andy Hill from CCG soon, really about social prescribing and how that could happen.
Great.
But if we could, Leanne, is there, just out of time, there are quite a few questions, I think, but maybe we could just choose one from you, or maybe one or two if we've got time.
Yeah, that's fine, Jane. So we've got a question from Julie Bolton from Age UK. She's asking, will the rise in the state pension age affect health, do you think? Although one train of thought is that it keeps people involved and active to continue in full-time work, but on the flip side, is that it allows less time to give priority to exercise and self-care. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Muir.
Yeah, well, firstly, of course, pension age is completely arbitrary. Bismarck chose 70. Bismarck introduced the old age pension to smash socialism. It's not commonly known this. It was to attack socialism. And he chose 70 because most people died at 70, so it wouldn't cost the state very much. So, and we picked up 70, then 65, 60. So all pension ages are arbitrary. I think it does raise a very important issue, and Age UK and I are involved in this, about preparation for the next phases, plural, of life. And that's why I don't like the word retirement, because many people will have different phases from 60 on. You see, if I looked at the NHS pension scheme, the expectation of life of someone aged 60 is 30, and the expectation of life of someone aged 65 is 25. So, but what do they think in their head is going on? So I'm trying to get the pension industry involved, including the public sector pensions, in giving people saying, well, okay, it's coming up, this thing called retirement. And you may need three months to really just clear up things, but this is an important new phase in life. And I would see working with Age UK and SASP, this is, some people phone me about the elixir of life and the laboratory services. I said, we've discovered the elixir of life. It's called knowledge, and it's consumed through lifelong learning. So yes, this thing called retirement is always a problem, whatever the age, and there'll be positives and negatives, but I don't think we're managing this transition very well at the moment.
That's brilliant. There's some lovely comments in the chat, Muir. I think that you have energised far more than just me this morning. And I think that we will continue to work with Muir around Live Longer Better as we go forward. As a key, Muir's been involved with so much around public health, around primary care, and a real influencer for us. And I think that we want to maintain as much expertise in Somerset as possible. So there are other questions, but if we can come back to those, and if we don't get time, Muir, if we could ask you to perhaps do that offline then and send it out, that would be great.
Yeah, I think it would be, what we're doing in other parts of the country is just putting up a website, Live Longer Better in Somerset or in Hertfordshire. And this, as I say, floats between the NHS, local authority, Age UK, local businesses. So I very much hope to be involved with you. And as the NHS settles down after yet again, I think the link with the care part, the ICS as they're called now, and the care partnership, I'd be very interested in meeting with them, with you. So SASP is doing great work.
Muir's doing great work. Let's backslap together. So thank you. Really appreciative. Thank you, Muir. I'm going to hand on to Andy Hill, who is the Associate Director of Integrated Care at Somerset CCG. Obviously a key strand. Oh, sorry, I think I was meant to hold on to Sarah to talk about Slido as well. Sarah, can I just pass to you before I pass to Andy?
Problem. So just to give you a heads up, we're going to be doing some polls later on. So we'll leave all the polls till the end, but just need to make sure that you have your smartphones ready. You can put your answers in the chat if you don't want to use your smartphones, but it's quite a good way for us to gather all this information. So just a heads up, later on we'll be doing some evaluation using Slido and your smartphones. But back to you, Jane.
Thank you. And now, because Andy's had a double fanfare now, I'm going to hand over to Andy to talk about social prescribing in Somerset. Thank you so much, Andy. And I know you had a bit of trouble joining this morning.
I did. Thank you ever so much for the opportunity. And it's lovely to be part of forward-thinking, energising conversations, particularly as what we've all been through over the last year. And as we come out of lockdown, we can start getting back to the really important stuff. So my remit was to demystify this concept, this phrase, social prescribing, and kind of make sure everyone realises what it is and how we are all a part of it. Ultimately, from a service perspective, it's the services moving in the right direction based on all that's been said already. So I've entitled it this sort of back to the future on purpose, because social prescribing really brings into the fore of our conversations between services and people and each other, things that we already know is good for us, but often don't play out in the service arena. And if we go back to a basic question, like if we were to design the ultimate health and care support system and we had a blank canvas, would we have what we have now? Maybe some parts, but certainly not all. if we asked ourselves another question, what sort of system of support and care and help, coaching even, would we aspire to leave our children's children? You know, I like to imagine that my children's children will walk into a service and be asked, what inspires you? What are you great at? What really matters? You know, what's there? What can we build on? You are a beautiful, unique, incredible human being, and you bring things to the world that no one else does. Then I'd like a conversation about what's up. Switch the things round. Okay, so social prescribing, why it is a fantastic term and why it is a terrible, awful term all at the same time. Okay, in its simplest terms, social prescribing is a service word, and it recognizes at long last in some spaces that the solutions to many things lie in the social space. They relate to our society, how we think, how we move, how we relate to each other, what we eat, our belief systems, you know, how positive we are, what we consider to be resources, there or not. Many of the things that we go to the NHS for are ultimately only solvable in the social space. For example, across the nation, we spend millions of pounds on antidepressants. Significant amount of that anxiety and depression is driven by debt and relationship problems. But as a generalization, we spend very little resource in promoting support for people around debt and relationship problems and resolving those, but we pay millions of pounds for the antidepressants and the physiological consequences later on down the line. So it's about recognizing where the solutions lie. There's lots of evidence base now that says 30% of the demand on general practice every day is driven by these wider determinants. How we are connected, how we move, what we eat, how we relate, what's our housing like, our education. In the past, from an NHS perspective, we used to consider these social determinants and not so much of our concern. But now, thankfully, across the whole nation and in Somerset, the services are realizing that we need to be in this space too. Why is it a terrible term? Because the word prescribing infers that a recommendation or a solution is given to you by an authoritative figure. And this is not the case at all. That's not how you realize, empower people. Okay, so Muir's already talked about a new set of language and a new way of relating to each other. Now, as a crude generalization, and these are crude generalizations on purpose to illustrate, it doesn't mean that these conversations don't happen. But if we are in a road traffic accident or we need some emergency care, the sorts of questions on the left-hand side are entirely appropriate. What's up? What's wrong? How can I fix you? You know? But most of the things that we suffer as human beings have this massive relationship with these wider determinants, and they can't be solved in those ways. So if we're going to move in this direction, the way we relate, services relate to people is going to change from questions like, what's the matter? What's lacking? What's the deficit? What's broken about you? To what matters to you? What's important? Instead of what's wrong, what's missing, what's a gap? What do you have? What's around you? You know, this is how we talk to ourselves and our neighbours, but for some reason, our services haven't adopted that same orientation. So, you know, social prescribing, helping each other in the social space is something that we all do naturally. And when I kind of wave over to my neighbour, Bill, and say, all right, mate, no, I'm not, my knee's playing up and I can't take the bins out. We don't say, would you like a social prescribing intervention? No, we just say, no problem, mate, I'll take your bins out. You know, social solution, helping each other. So that reorientation is really, really important. Take an example, very quick example. What's the matter? My respiratory condition is playing up. Okay, you can imagine the set of consequences for the person, the professional, if we ask people questions in that way. Alternatively, if we say, Bill, what's the most important thing to you right now? The most important thing to me right now is to be able to go with my COPD to New Zealand on the airplane to my daughter's wedding. That is the most important thing to me. You can imagine how different the responses of the person and the professional helping would be when the question is asked in a different way. There's all sorts of case studies, but a very simple. Peter the person, not Peter the patient. Peter the person has been becoming low in morale, low in mood, and has been becoming isolated since his partner passed away 2 years ago. The GP has been visiting him more often and found that his health and well-being is deteriorating, largely because he is withdrawing, increasingly so, and has got to the point he's afraid to come out. Now, the NHS cannot solve that. Conventional services cannot solve that. New ways of helping Peter with that would be to send someone along to meet him, to get to know, to build trust, to find out what matters to him, what motivates him, gain trust, then help link him in a meaningful way to other people with similar issues. And we see this all the time where we have those different conversations. People come out of themselves, they tap back into their strengths, they realize that they have strengths, they connect with others, and then they start to do all sorts of really positive things. So it's not simple. But like Muir said, social prescribing is part of this movement of change. It's a characteristic that we want to embody in services and the way they relate to people. It's a movement of change. In some ways, it's bringing things we already know back to the fore. You know, it cannot be owned, though. This is a fallacy, and it's not a service. It is an ever-expanding phenomenon. So social prescribing, for me, is working really well when two members of the community help each other out. You know, one person says, oh, I'm not doing well with my cooking anymore. And the other says, oh, did you know there's a lunch club at the football club twice a week? Oh, brilliant. And I'll take you in my car. Awesome. You know, community resilience built from the ground upwards. It's everybody's business. We're all part of it. We're all doing it, but we want to bring it more into how the services relate to people. From an NHS perspective, we kind of are starting to have a bigger stake and see the importance of this, which is really good. And we're using the word social prescribing because the NHS kind of thinks it's okay. And that's fine. We'll work with that for the time being. Okay, until another phrase, a better phrase comes along. But what we've noticed is for a lot of the things that we come to the health system for that can only be resolved in the social space, in order for that to happen, you need some magic ingredients. One of them is, number one, all of us being more neighbourly. And COVID has amplified that to an extreme. And our willingness to be curious about our neighbours, to be interested in them, to help them out, to offer the hand of friendship, you know, small acts of kindness. Huge, huge in COVID. One of the most amazing things COVID brought us. But that quality needs to be there. If people are keeping themselves to themselves and behind closed doors, you don't get to find out. And people are willing to help each other if they're asked in the right way. We all know this. None of this is a surprise to people. Community-led organisations, they magnetise resources to them, people and resources. And there's an evidence base around this that says, you know, if a community doesn't have these things in place, it's harder for people to make those connections and those social solutions to play out. There's some essential services that you need in place. You know, the services that do deal with debt, benefits, mental health, housing. The other thing is people making connections with each other. A massive resource can be established even between one person making a meaningful connection to another. So from the service perspective, the NHS perspective, we've got 3 ways that we're tangibly starting to be part of this change, this conversation that some colleagues here, some people and colleagues are already immersed in. And I'm really, really glad to be working with Tom McConnell, Pip from the local authority, Jane, and lots of others. There's an army of us that all would like services to start being like this much more. So there's 3 things that the NHS is doing. One is the provision of health coaches, a new discipline that is all about empowering people, motivating people, making sure people have knowledge, you know? The other one is this concept of link workers, social prescribing link workers. It's people who are really skilled at acting as a bridge between a conventional service and that community space where all the power is. And then the third thing is investment in community services, in community groups. The NHS doesn't at the moment, for example, put much in the space number 3 or number 2. If we're going to see a shift in demand, we really need to. So there's a really exciting time. There's lots and lots of partners who are involved in making these changes. And there's lots of people here on this presentation who are way ahead of the presentation, and this will probably feel a bit like old hat. So I hope that gives you an impression of how services are heading in this right direction. You know, look forward to any questions or being part of further discussions. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you, Andy. That's a really fantastic piece. Thank you for sharing, and I'm sure it's given us all some much needed food for thought in the area. I particularly liked the focus around the conversational piece between people, keeping things based around people's goals, you know, what's important to them. I really like that. And yeah, really thought-provoking, so thank you. If everyone's got any thoughts or comments, if you could just reflect on them for a moment. And I'm just thinking about the time, we're going to move on to the next item, but we will reflect back at the end. So if that's okay, Andy, with you, we'll have some time at the end to do that. Lovely, thank you. So moving on to something slightly different now, and we wanted to take this opportunity, whilst there are many organisations on the call, to listen to actually someone who is living proof of social prescribing and how keeping active and a positive outlook is so important at this challenging time. Chrissy is one of our incredibly inspiring We Are Undefeatable ambassadors, and she has so kindly pre-recorded this video for us today. So please sit back, or should I say stand, and listen to Chrissy tell us all about her journey over the last 18 months. Enjoy.
I've always been aware of the importance of maintaining a healthy diet and taking regular exercise for both my physical health and mental well-being. But my main issue for the past 13 years has been living with poor mobility as a result of osteoarthritis, which has somewhat restricted all that I used to do, mainly because my balance is no longer good. I've had a bilateral hip and knee replacement, which has left me pain-free, but with significant weakness on my left side, partly due in turn to degenerative spinal disease and notable kyphoscoliosis. This has resulted in a greater risk of me falling over. Just turning too quickly can mean I lose my balance and then down I go. To help rectify this, I attended my local community hospital, who were running an excellent falls prevention exercise program, incorporating both strength and balance exercises. And then 3 years ago, I was referred to the SASP GP referral program through Dr. Cooper from the Department for Care of the Elderly. Arrangements were made for me to meet with the exercise referral team at Beach Wellness, where I discussed my health issues, and I was shown around the gym. It was explained how the GP referral setup worked, and what was reassuring was that this wasn't going to be one size fits all, but a program specifically designed for my individual needs. The gym itself was quite small, so numbers attending were limited, which meant that you felt you had the personal attention of the coordinators, which I really liked. There was a lovely welcoming feel to everything, and it was good to see others using the gym were of a similar age. We were all there because of health issues and were working at a pace to suit our needs. At no time did I feel uncomfortable or awkward, and soon got chatting to the other members. We were very much a little family unit, each encouraging one another as we progressed through the programme, whilst at all times getting the support and guidance of the instructors, who were always made you feel well looked after. It was happy ship, and friendships quickly formed, and I look forward to attending each session. I continued going weekly until lockdown brought everything to a grinding halt in February last year. But what I had learned through the sessions meant that I could maintain some form of limited programme of exercise at home. Living on my own, it would have been so easy to give in, slump into a comfy armchair with a large box of chocolates and become a daytime TV addict. But why waste all the good that's been done and the progress I've made over the past couple of years? It's so important to have a good daily routine, a reason to get up and get on with things, and it's surprising what can be achieved when you put your mind to it. Even the most simple of exercises carried out on a regular basis can mean the difference between remaining mobile or letting yourself give in, resulting in the inevitable expanded waistline for starters, and as the months go by, an overall deterioration of your general health and well-being. So I bought myself a static exercise bike, and much as I would have liked a proper bike, my poor balance was just too precarious to risk that. And then I set about a programme of gentle exercise, starting the day with Joe Wick's 10 minutes home workout for seniors, and not strenuous, but enough to keep those core muscles working. And then every afternoon, I spend half an hour on my exercise bike, which I have parked by my window overlooking the countryside beyond. The scenery is forever changing, but I can sometimes get a feeling of deja vu, as I've seen it all many times before. And it was suggested that I look at the SASP Love to Pedal virtual rides, which I could view on my computer as I pedalled along on my exercise bike. It's such a brilliant concept, and I have now had a virtual spin through Vivery Park, cycled around the Bridgewater Docks and along the Bridgewater Canal, plus a lovely ride through the Sturt Wildfowl and Wetland Trust without having to leave the comfort of my home. There are many more rides available to view, all of which are timed, so I can choose just how far I wish to travel. Despite lockdown, everything seemed to be going so well, although I was probably eating more than I needed to and not getting out quite like I used to. When just before Christmas, I became unwell, I was admitted to Musgrove Park Hospital with a condition known as giant cell arteritis, the treatment for which is fairly long-term doses of steroids. Among the many possible side effects of long-term steroid use, there is the risk of weight gain, particularly around the midriff. So once again, I was very much aware of the importance of the knowledge I'd gained from attending the SASP fitness program. Eating a healthy diet in moderation and exercising regularly. Lockdown continues, but with the vaccination rollout moving at such a pace, there is light at the end of what seems to have been a very long and dark tunnel. life may never be quite the same again, but I have learned that if I do my best to look after both my physical and mental health, remembering all that I gained from the SAS programme, then I will get through. After all, I owe it to those who have got me this far and have kept me feeling positive when things were not going so well. I won't give in, nor must I forget that as a group, we've been called the undefeatables, and as you can see from my experience, for very good reason.
I hope you agree. That was a really lovely piece there around social prescribing that Chrissy shared with us today. It really goes to show, even despite all the challenges that she's facing with her own health and her own circumstances, you know, she's defied the odds and kept herself moving at a time that's been really difficult. Using all of that social prescribing model that she mentioned at the start there, with getting down at the beach hotel, into the wellness centre and doing her GP referral programme, and then moving on to something like the Love to Pedal scheme, which if you haven't already heard about it, please do have a look on our website to find out a little bit more. Be great to sort of get some more people doing some virtual cycling. And I saw a comment from Yer about maybe a competition going for Somerset versus Devon, so I'm quite interested in finding a bit more about that. If you've got any reflections, then please do pop them in the chat. That'd be lovely to hear your thoughts based on what Chrissy shared with us today. And I think, given our time, we're going to move swiftly on to our actual
Leanne,
exercise. Sorry,
Leanne. I just have one question from Jem, really, for Andy, particularly, which was around social prescribing and cost, and how the NHS are. And from Andy's perspective of where he's thinking now, what that looks like for the general population.
This is a really interesting question, because you're right. If the NHS and other services are going to take this seriously, then we need to channel some resource into it. For Somerset, there is a considerable start being made this year of around about £2.8 million in the health coaches and the link workers and the investment in community support, which is a step in the right direction. Depending on where you come from, what you're used to, that would seem like a huge amount of funding, and it is really, really positive. But when you consider the amount of money that goes into the end of healthcare, the hospital end, for example, it pales into insignificance. So it's a start in the right direction. The other thing I would say is the NHS is only one small player in this space. Like I said, there's no monopoly on this. So the good thing is that the county council are investing in this space in a big way too. And also there's lots of services, district council and other voluntary sector partners that do social prescribing work anyway. So there is a specific question about the NHS, pounds that's being helped in this direction. But I think the question should be asked more broadly about who is contributing in this space. The other thing that's really, really important is that a lot of the community resource, the raw resource that we're willing to give and share between people in our road, is free of charge, and we miss out on that time and time again, just because we don't ask the right questions. So it's not all about the money, it's a bit about the money, it's about multi-partnership, all of our contributions, but it's also about the way we relate to people differently. Some people don't realize the resource they've got right at their own fingertips, because we never ask, what are you good at? Who's around you? So it's a big answer, I'm sorry, but it's a good question.
Thank you, Andy. And I think that as someone who works with Andy, actually, he's a huge advocate for the community sector, and I'm going to say has helped really champion the cause of the community sector. And actually, we are seeing a change in attitude and some investment as we go.
I would also say, Jane, thank you for that, that myself and colleagues who are in the service side of it have really learnt all this from people out in this space, you know. So we've been taught what good should look like by yourselves, essentially.
And I think we are in a more collaborative space. So thank you, Andy. Leanne, I'm sorry, I'm handing back to you.
That's okay. So I'm very aware that my Fitbit's just told me that I haven't moved much in the last hour, and I haven't done my 250 steps. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to our wonderful colleague, Joe Smith, who's here with us today as one of our senior active lifestyle officers in Mendip, who's going to take us through a little exercise program, I believe. Over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Leanne. So, as Leanne said, we've all been sitting for a rather long time now. For those that don't feel quite so confident, do stay seated, but make sure that you're wiggling your bottom so you're on the last third of your chair so your feet are firmly planted. And for those of you who feel a little bit more confident, let's get on our feet, because that's what we need to do. We've been there for quite a long time. You can use a chair for support if you need it as well. First of all, I'm aware that we've all been looking at the screen for a rather long time. And if you're sitting at the screen for a very long time, there's a great movement that can help with the head and the neck, but also to take your eyes away from that screen. So I'm going to get you to look to your right, 20 feet, you may not be able to see 20 feet, but as long as you're looking 20 feet, focus on something 20 feet away. We're looking for 20 seconds so that we're taking ourselves away from that screen just for that amount of time. As I say, this is really great for the neck as well. You can do both sides, 10 on each side. So that's really important. Remember that one as you go forward. So I'm going to get you to move your feet. So I just want you to just gently march the feet, whether you're seated or standing. Remember, those feet can stay firmly planted on the floor. And I just want you to just take and relax those shoulders, to just loosen off, rolling those shoulders backwards, and then we're going to take them forward, just steadying and loosening off. You've been sat at the screen, particularly if you've been on your computer as well. And then we're going to go into a little swim. So you're in the swimming pool now. Just imagine that the weather isn't quite as hideous as it is outside at the moment, and that you're taking into a lovely pool. You've got the sun beaming down. It's really nice. You're feeling that and enjoying that. And now you're going to get your skipping ropes out. So you're going to just have a little bit of a skip as well, because you're really showing off today. Just a gentle march, remember. Taking those little ropes at your side. Then we're going to show off and we're going to skip backwards. Really moving those joints. Getting that synovial fluid right through the joints. And then we're going to take it down to our feet. So just wriggling and shaking off. And we're going to just do some heel dig. So digging the heels so those toes are pointed up towards the ceiling, arms just nice and relaxed, shaking those hands as you go. And then we're going to point those toes down in the front, tapping those toes down in front of you as you loosen off, and then back into your march. And we're just going to swing those arms a little bit more. So you're feeling a little bit looser now. You can feel the joints moving and mobilizing, feeling a lot better. Big smiles on the faces. Going to take those feet a little bit wide, seated or standing again. And we're just going to swing those arms round to the sides, loosening off, keeping tall all the time. So think about that posture, drawing those tummy muscles in just slightly, engaging that core as you twist from side to side, and then back into your little march. And we're going to bring those arms up a little bit more, as if you're thinking about going out for a nice little walk, enjoying a little moment between the rain and the wind if you're really lucky. That's good. So swinging through. Excellent. Now we're going to curl the heels. You can do this if you're seated in the chair as well. So you're just going to curl the heels up behind, if you can see mine, or underneath the chair if you're seated. So we're just warming up the back of those legs a little bit as well. Lifting those heels up behind. If you're really feeling full of beans, you can bring in the arms as well. Taking those heels up, working those muscles in the back of the legs. If you are standing and feeling wobbly, you can always use a chair to hold on to. And then we're going to lift those knees up in front. So raising those knees. Excellent. You've got some smiles on the faces now, so I know that we're warming and waking up nicely now. And then swinging those arms, marching those feet. Perfect. Steadying off. Taking it away from working on that screen and on that computer for a little while. I'm going to take those feet nice and low, and then we're going to just slowly reach down the sides of the body and then to the other side. So again, working with that core, reaching down, lifting up. Reaching down the sides and lifting up. Keeping that tummy pulled in nicely, so drawing that belly button in as you're moving. Fabulous. Okay, so we're back into the pool now. So nice big circles, nice big reaches through to the front, round, squeezing those shoulder blades together as you come back. Nice big circles. Perfect. Excellent. It's lovely seeing all these arms flapping about. It's like we're all in flight here. Wonderful. Okay. Okay, now we're going to reach up a little bit higher. Going to tap the toe out to the side, seated or standing. So same arm, same leg, reaching over across the head. Now, if you're suffering with your shoulders, you can always bring the hands over to the front rather than taking them over the head. So if that feels a little bit more difficult, just reach over to the front instead of taking it over the head. Brilliant. That's good. Should be feeling that body loosening up nicely now. Excellent work. Okay, and then we're going to squeeze those arms. We're taking them around to the front and squeezing those shoulder blades back together. So we're opening and stretching across the front and the back, but working those muscles in the upper back. So those ones that give us good posture. So what we find when we're over the screen, our head is down, leaning down all the time, really, really poor for the posture. So using an exercise that's going to work those muscles in the upper back is really useful. Bringing those arms down again. Are we feeling a bit more full of beans now? Fantastic. So just a little bit more. I'm just going to loosen off and do some stretches, which are also really useful when you're sat at the desk for a long amount of time or sat looking at a screen for a long amount of time. So I'm going to just give the legs a little bit of a stretch to begin with. Again, you can do this one seated as well as standing. So we're just going to hold on to the chair, back of the chair, bend the knees just slightly, and then we're going to straighten out our right leg. If you're seated, you're keeping the left knee bent and you're straightening the right leg out in front of you, and you're just going to gently lean forward so you get a nice little stretch down the back of the legs. So this is really important to do when we're sat for long amounts of time. This is really an area that gets very, very tight. So giving it a nice stretch when you're sat. So just leaning forward to stretch that off, and then bring yourself back up again, or bring the leg back in if you're sat on a chair. Same on the other side. So if you're standing, the knees bend just slightly, straightening out the left leg this time. And then we're going to just slowly roll our hand down the leg until we can feel a lovely little stretch in the back of that thigh. Keeping those chins up a little. No need to put your chins on your knees. That'll be really showing off today. No need for that. Brilliant. And give it a little wriggle and a shake. Upper body now, really, really good one that's going to be helpful for when we're sat for long amounts of time. So we're going to take our arm, our left arm, and take it across the body. Giving the hand, taking it underneath the elbow, hugging that arm in towards you. If it feels uncomfortable, you can just take the hand onto the shoulders to support. But if you want a really nice long stretch, keep the arm long and just hug that arm in towards you. A great stretch for if you've been long amounts of time writing on the computer or on the phone. And then release the arm down, give it a little wriggle. Same on the other side, so bringing the arm across the chest. Other hand comes up to support just behind the elbow. Give it a little hug in, holding it to you nice and strong and tight. Nice, relaxed, deep breathing. nice and chilled, and let that arm go. And then just to loosen us completely, same again, if you're seated or standing, we're going to come down to the floor, cross the arms across your chest, take the hands down towards the floor, and then take a nice deep breath in as you reach up towards the ceiling. Remember, keep the arms in front if it feels too much on your shoulders. Take it down. I want you to breathe out. Deep breath in, lift up, stretch tall, stretch that body. Slowly bring those arms down as you breathe out. Last time, reach up nice and tall. Give those hands a little wriggle and a shake while they're up in the air. Slowly bring them down, staying tall, breathing out, and then bring those hands around in front. Well done, you've done your session for today and you're feeling energized and ready to get on with the rest of the session. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jo. I felt like I was on the road to Amarillo at one point, so which was good. I was a bit worried about the sweat patches under my arms, actually, if I'm really honest. You know. I'm sure nobody else had that problem. But so fantastic. And if you want to see more of Jo, you can find her on our website on Be Active at Home. Jo had a great honour of being picked among thousands to go on the Channel 4 TV, where the whole team watched her avidly as she played with baked bean tins and things. So amazing. So thank you so much, Jo. So the smallest things can make a difference for your mobility. Welcome back, everybody. Help everybody. Some lovely comments in the chat for Jo. Definitely SASP trying to practice what it preaches. We're also poor sometimes at sitting down for too long, and we try really hard to make sure that other people don't as well and really understand the message. Your science will have given you quite a lot around why we should move more. So please don't forget, though people will think you're a little bit mad if you start swimming in the middle of your office. Or walking to Amarillo in terms of for me. But however, it is really important for your body to move it and to keep your muscles moving. So one of the key things that has come up again and again when we're dealing with agendas around older people is the digital confidence that people in more mature years have. And it's one of the things that we are really keen to do. I mentioned right at the start about the survey that we did around the shielded population. And it was quite stunning to us how many people who were definitely over 70 and over 75 actually have access to a digital device. But their ability to use it and their confidence around all sorts of things is severely hampered, I suspect, by not having people around them to support, or really they're just a lack of confidence about how to use digital safely. And so this last piece of our conference is really the start of a conversation that we are going to have around how do we connect older people to digital so that it isn't quite such a scary experience for them. So I'm going to hand over to Kate Goodson, who's the Chief Exec of Cosmic. She unfortunately couldn't make today, but did record a short film, which actually is really, really useful. I've watched it twice now, and that's where my mum's digital piece came from. So, Sarah, could we start the film? Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate. I'm Joint Chief Exec of an organisation called Cosmic, and I've been asked to share with you some of my thoughts and ideas around supporting people to really get going with their health and well-being using apps and using digital technologies. I've not got long, so I hope I'm going to give you a really quick whistle-stop tour. I'm just going to share my screen with you, so just bear with me whilst I do this. So the first little piece, just to introduce us, we're a digital skills organisation based in Devon, just outside of Exeter. And we're really here to focus on supporting people to improve their own digital skills, no matter what stage of the digital journey that they're at. If you want more information, I'll leave my details at the end and hope please do get in touch with us. But where I want to start with this is that there is a whole big wealth of health and wellbeing apps that have been approved by the NHS on the NHS library. So it's really worth having a look at some of those and getting a sense of them. I've just listed here and just shown you some of the categories that are available there. Just be warned though, some of them do have in-app purchases that are required, and others do require a prescription from their doctor or their GP to be able to access them for free. But they are worth spending a bit of time with, downloading them and having a go yourself. This is really the key message I want to give you today, is all of the apps I give you today, have a go with 3 or 4 of them and just see if they work for you. If they don't, delete them. If they do, carry on using them and share those with people that you work with. So just a couple of ones to share with you in this area. One is a great area around sleep support. In the NHS, they've got some really good apps that you can play with. I've listed sort of 3 or 4 there for you, but also look at the other ones that are available in terms of just standard proprietary ones. Headspace is one that a lot of people use. So just have a look at that one and get a sense of those as well. You'll find that they might really revolutionize your sleep patterns. Alongside that, one of the ones in the NHS apps is the EXI app, which again is really useful. It helps you to develop a 12-week plan, which can be really useful for any client, and you can work on that with them. But also in there are some exercise programs that you can help and support people to use. Some of them are based around having a watch or some sort of a phone, some sort of GPS ability, but others are ones that you're able to use within the home environment. So they might also give you some thoughts and ideas around some programs you might like to run. But don't forget YouTube. I'm always banging on about YouTube, and I think it's so important that we get to see some of the stuff that's in there for free. So there are some brilliant apps in YouTube, or they're not apps, sorry, some brilliant videos that we can just listen to. We don't have to watch them, we can just listen to them at night for sleep support. There's some of the ones I use quite regularly in here as well. I use the Honest Guys quite a lot for myself, for sleep or for relaxation. So have a look at some of those and have a play with them yourself. And alongside that, have a look at some of the free YouTube apps, I keep saying that, the free YouTube videos for fitness. Here's some of the great ones. I use the 9-minute HIIT workout ones that are really good, but there's a whole range of ones that you could use in there as well. But one of my personal favorites, if you're into this, is actually exercises for older people. And my favorite is Bob and Brad, who, yes, they are American, but they're absolutely hilarious and great to watch. And you can see the channel there, Bob and Brad, 5 exercises all seniors should do daily. They're fantastically well done, but also really funny. So do, again, I keep saying this, but have a look at them and give them a go. Also, though, think about the power of Zoom. I do a Zoomer-sized class on a Tuesday and a Friday with my friends. We have someone who comes online and does exercises with us. So think about using Zoom in this kind of way. You might already be doing this, but we use it to focus on strength and conditioning for ladies of our age. We're really getting into doing that stuff. But also there are lots of ones that are free, but also there are also loads of them that are free on Instagram and Facebook Live. And one of my favorites is this guy based in North Devon called Blakey. He does Blakey Bay Fitness, and he does free Instagram yoga on Instagram Live every morning. There are lots of people doing that, but it could be a really great way for getting some people interested and starting to work in this way. And thinking of that, particularly for older people, they sometimes need some help with devices. And this is one of our favourites that we've been working with older people within the last sort of 6 months, and particularly during this lockdown phase. This is called Facebook Portal. They're about £100, so they're not too expensive. They sit in a kind of reasonable priced area. And what they do is provide a little, you can see the little kind of frame environment that they have, but they're really easy for older people to use. They're set up in a way that allows them to do Facebook Messenger, for example, allows them to use video calling, and also allows them to use Zoom in a really simple way. And we've been using these with people with dementia, doing reminiscence therapy, and with other older people supporting exercise classes. So have a look at these portals if you've not seen them before, and see if they might be useful. So they come with big buttons that you can press, or more importantly, they come with voice activation where you can say, portal, call so-and-so, and you can do it in that way as well. So a little idea there that might be worth playing with. And also, if they might already have a tablet or some sort of device, and thinking about installing Zoom or Facebook Messenger for video calling or WhatsApp video calling, any of those would be useful on these devices. Once they're set up in a tablet, they tend to be quite easy to use. But there's one thing that often we come across with people who might be older is they might not want to invest in using Wi-Fi. So buying a tablet that has a little 4G card installed into it, so it allows them to use data in this way, could be really useful as well. And I've just given you a couple of examples of those there. And also there are other devices we can use as well. Here's some of the ones. This is a journey I've been on with my mum, who's 83 now, and I think it's a great one to share. You can see she likes the colour purple, but where she started on the journey was I bought her one of the really cheap little fitness trackers that was about £20, and I encouraged her to start to do a certain number of steps a day. I thought she wouldn't do it, but actually she got really into it. And she really enjoys now telling me every night on WhatsApp how many steps she's done. So we started her off on the little fitness tracker, and then we moved her to one that actually had a bigger screen and had numbers on it, and also she could able to tell the time. But also we connected that up so that she was able to see some of her messages, a few of her messages from the likes of WhatsApp and things. And she started to really enjoy that as well, and really continued on that journey. Now what she wants is an Apple Watch, because she's found out she can do her heart rate on it. And one of her friends is doing that work, and also using some of the stress release areas within the Apple Watch. And also she's now keen to use it from a fall detection point of view as well. So the fall detection software inside the Apple Watch now is really amazing, and also comes with full ECG monitoring and alerts for those pieces. So she's now thinking about investing in an Apple Watch that will support not just her fitness, but also her well-being. And as I say, particularly that piece around fall detection. So whichever affordability point there's a great opportunity to be able to use one of these kinds of watches. And alongside that, it's really interesting to think about how we could use these watches to support people in doing their own little virtual challenge. Now, going back to the basic watches, we're working with a particular housing association with independent living, where we've created the Golden Olympics, and within there, supporting people to do a certain number of steps, to write them on the board when they come back in to their place, and adding up that score so that they're seeing whether they are, as a group, whether they are increasing their steps over each week or not. So starting to see ways in which we could use some of this technology to start to build some virtual challenges. And I thought it's also worth just looking at some of the software that's available around some of these virtual challenges. This is one that I've been using in the last few weeks. You can see I broke my hand over Christmas, so I'm just in a recovery stage of my own fitness journey. And I thought I really needed to challenge myself to get out and about. And so this one here is called Conqueror, and it allows you to join one of their challenges. You can see you can swim the English Channel, or you can walk the Inca Trail, or you can hike Mount Everest. The one I'm doing is I'm walking the Camino, which is the piece in northern Spain. I'm walking that with my sister. And we've signed up to the challenge. At the end of the challenge, if you do it, you get a little medal through the post. But what's really fantastic with this is as you're doing your journey, so as you're going out for a walk, your watch or your phone is seeing how far you're walking, is automatically adding that up into the challenge, and then moves your pin along in Google Maps to see where you are walking towards. And what I really love about it is then you can click on Street View in the same app and it will show you where you are. So last week I walked through Pamplona in northern Spain and could look at all the buildings where I would be walking along and where I potentially would be staying that night. So what I love about this kind of world is actually that we are able to, through digital, we are able to bring people together and work together on a little challenge or a little journey in that space. So this one here is Conqueror. And as I say, there are many others, and I think SASP have a challenge software that they're able to use. But also there's another one called Challenge Hound, where you're allowed to invite 10 people for free and again develop those pieces within those journeys. As a business, you might be interested that we are at the moment walking our way around all the chocolate tourism places in Europe. So we set ourselves a challenge. We're uploading all of our own walks each week, and we at the moment we're in Switzerland, walking around Switzerland, going to the chocolate factories. And we do that every Monday morning. It's just a bit of fun, but again, a way that we're working together to build those pieces up. So just another thought around this piece, if we are encouraging people to go out, and obviously going out at night or on their own, this is an app which I think is great, which is called Be Safe. It's a free app that we can use. We are allowed to, within the system, we're allowed to press a button that says, follow me. So for a period of time, you might then send that to your friend or your family member and allow them to follow you during that time period in case you feel unsafe, or have a big SOS button that if you are feeling nervous, you can press that SOS button and your friends or whoever you've set up in there gets a notification to be able to track you or to be able to contact you within there. And finally, if we're in this piece where we're thinking about how to make changes, one of the apps I really like is called Streaks. And this app you can download and you can create your own goals. And every day it will remind you what goals you've set yourself. Some of them might be health related, where they might link into your own health apps that are on the phone. But other ones might be more habit forming, like walking your dog or doing yoga or listening to a sleep meditation app at the end of the day. And all of these can start to build up to really make some change. I like this one. We use this with other people and our clients to help them to create change as well. So I hope those little ideas might start to get you thinking and supporting your clients in a very different way. So all that's left for me to say is thank you very much. I hope I know it's a really quick whistle-stop tour. I'll share the slides with you, but I would encourage you to think about using technology to support health and well-being of your clients or beneficiaries in a different way. If you've got any ideas or if you would like to ask any other questions of us, do give us a shout. Come onto our website, cosmic.org.uk, or email me, kate@cosmic.org.uk. I hope that helps and really look forward to meeting you soon. Thank you.
Brilliant. And I hope that people are kind of inspired by what we could do with digital. And I think it sort of goes back for me to the bit that Muir started with about actually not stereotyping older people in not being able to do digital, but encouraging them to use some of the things that we think will have, actually that they would enjoy first and foremost, but actually might benefit their health and well-being too. And digital will be an ongoing conversation. So the next steps for us really quickly, we're hoping that every 6 to 8 weeks we will do not a conference, but a short, maybe an hour, where we will take particular issues. And that's what we will send out some evaluation about. And we want to build up a community of learning around physical activity. It might be around older people, it might be around other aspects. So it might be around the demographic or it might be around particular themes. But we will let everybody know what's going on, and people can pick and choose throughout the year as to what they want. And what we really want It's not just SASP to host them, but perhaps other people to host as well. And that we pull together speakers across Britain now, which we can do very easily now that we're virtual, and have a real chance to have a look at what everybody else is doing and hear and energise ourselves with some input for us, rather than forever thinking about how we can support others. So I just will wrap up and say thank you so much. I really, really appreciate people's time. Thank you.